Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mystic Junkies podcast, the history of mystery comedy show coming at you fast. And we got a new guest with us tonight. We got Vanity Allura.
Hello.
Yeah.
First time on the show, right?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And you know us because you're one of the burlesque dancers coming to perform,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I will be here performing burlesque soon.
Awesome.
Yeah, I perform all over Central Florida, and I think this will be my first Sarasota show.
Nice.
Actually.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excited to have you. And Tweedledee is back. Tweedle.
It's been a while. Nice.
She left us.
She's married.
Wow.
Married.
now. Get out of your heads, guys.
I have, things to do, places to go. I'm just kidding.
Unacceptable.
A new thing to do a week.
People to see.
Did you do
Who
any
did
new
you
things?
see while
It
you
was
was away?
It was for those of you that tuned in. Well, they know that I got hitched a little while ago, so this was my honeymoon. That's why I was gone for a little while. I didn't abandon the Mystic Junkies, contrary to their beliefs.
Likely story.
She was doing research.
Where'd you go?
Pope.
Well, one of the main places was we went to Italy. That was the reason for our honeymoon, because we wanted to get blessed by the Pope, which we had a chance to meet. Like
Really?
it wasn't like he was just 10 feet away. I mean, he came down and I shook his hand.
Yeah. How much does
And,
that cost?
I think she gave him a wedding box, and she's like, "This is some pictures. Can you just bless these? And can you just bless this
Yeah.
one too?"
You know,
Did he
even
put like his palm on your head and was like,
So you
God
just
knows?
request
It's like
that?
it's okay that you're Asian.
well, there's a
do
little
you
bit
know
of a
people?
process. There's a little bit of a process. I did try to whoever that kind of sort of had some affiliation. I tried to go through that, but there is a little bit of a process that you have to plan ahead.
I would imagine.
And-
There's a little bit of a process.
Right.
Gotta get vetted.
But
Yeah, you don't
there's
just tweet at him.
No dog, I'm dropping
Coming
into his
in
DMs.
today.
Yeah.
hi Francesco. Ciao.
Ciao, Bella. Hey, what's up?
You're the coolest Pope so far.
I'm just kidding. I know we got to get into this, but this is so interesting. What in a short, what's the process?
Well, you have to email sort of like this. You have to kind of contact, right? You have to fill out like this application. You have to email the pontifical college, and because they kind of run all that clerical stuff, and you basically give all your information, like who you are, where you got married, so that you actually really did get married in a church, and to where, what city, state. So it's not just like people that are pretending to try to meet the Pope, saying
don't
that
want
they just got
pagans.
married, So I don't know how much looking into it that they did, but you have to give all your, the dates and stuff, and then you actually pick up the tickets the night before ahead of time, so that they know that you're not going to be like a no-show or something. Because what if you just say, yeah, I'm going to come, but then you don't come? Because tickets are actually free. You don't have to pay.
2 at a minimum.
Sounds like
Yeah.
sounds like McCurdy's Comedy Theater.
drink
Do they have a 2
And this was at the Vatican?
This was, it was outside of Vatican City, but it's very close by. Yes, it's in Rome.
Oh, okay. In a church in Rome.
In a
On a corner, on a street.
a lot of times like nuns run these because they're very helpful, and they're like kind of like the main core and the spine, the support group of the different operations. So you meet in their office, but they kind of give you like a little bit of orientation too, like things to do, what not to do, things to wear. Obviously it's appropriate. You have to have like shoulders covered. You have to wear your wedding attire. So you're not just showing up in like, even if you're wearing like nice clothing, you have to wear something that resembles your wedding attire. Interesting. So when you meet him, there's like a little bit of a process, and they kind of tell you that. It was awesome because it was during a time when it wasn't that busy in Italy, or in Rome specifically. So the tourists were actually a little bit less. So instead of being in the huge courtyard, St. Peter's Basilica, which holds like 60,000 people, we were actually in a smaller hall, which is right off to the side of St. Peter's Basilica, which holds 6,000. So on top of that, that kind of is a nicer, more intimate setting, so to speak, right? But then, in addition to the 6,000, the sposi novelli, which are the newlyweds, are actually in a very smaller section, right up close to where his
honor.
stage is, right? So you're up to his left, and there's only maybe at that time like 15 other couples, so there weren't that many of us. So it's already during a time when it's not that many people, not many tourists, and on top of that, the spouses were even less. So there's that. But then on top of that, a lot of times other Roman Catholics don't know this lesser known tradition. I feel like we had a little bit more time with him because I knew about, how I am with research,
Yeah.
right?
I said she was sitting there having a conversation with him.
I knew that there's a tradition that Roman Catholics have that if you bring what's called the zucchetto, which is his skull cap, it's a tradition that popes will actually switch out with you the one that they're wearing. So I found out the tailor that the Pope uses, and it's somewhere in Rome. Purchased it because I didn't want it shipped to the U.S. for like $70. Like, why do that, right? So I had them reserve it for me. I purchased it like maybe the night before, and they put it in a little special box and everything. And he only keeps it, or he only does that switching if it's his size. If it's not the correct size, then he doesn't, why would he put it on, right? So I found out his tailor they know his size. I don't know what his size is, right? And he's approaching. He's in like not as good as health, right? So he comes out and he's on his own 2 feet and he's like waving the crowd, like kind of like sit down, like don't get up, whatever, right? And then he does his greeting, and then it's maybe like 20 minutes of like a little bit of a reflection, scripture reading in different languages, and not just him, other people come up and do it. And then at the end, they kind of wheel him around on a wheelchair, so it's a little bit speedier, right? And he's kind of like coming down, and we're like the
I
first.
wish he'd have been on like one of them.
Electric
like a Segway.
Don't give him his own
Like a
electric
Segway.
wheelchair.
I love that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, dude,
Like
just
a
hauling
little,
ass.
like the Pope on a little
Right?
right.
Just holds his hand up and just whap, 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 whap.
No, it was cool because like we were the first ones there, but because we were the first ones there, then we were the last to be greeted, so to speak, because he was coming from the other side. So they were pushing him down, and he'd meet with everyone kind of and say a few things, and if they had like any articles like a rosary, he would bless it, or like if they had some kind of item, he would bless it or bless them. And then he comes down to like where we are, and we're just like, oh my gosh, like here he is, he's coming, right? And he comes down, and I grab his hand. I don't know if that's like appropriate or not, but I grabbed his hand and I rattled off like every Italian, like I knew how to say Pope or Holy Father in every phrase I could think of in Italian, because that helps to maybe captivate him a little bit longer, So I was like saying Santidad, Santissimo, Papa, and I was like calling him everything. I didn't know what to say.
Feed a duck in the river or something.
Well, I didn't know what to say, right? So I'm just calling him like Father in like several different ways, and he's like looking and he's nodding, and they said that he speaks Italian, Portuguese, he understands English, but he'll respond in Italian, So he was saying something, but I don't know what he was saying. And then I'm grabbing his hand. His hands were actually kind of cold, but then he sees like the box, so I opened it, and then right away, like he just knew. So he took it, and then he puts it on his head, and he looks at me. He's like kind of like, is it cool? Like, does it fit? And I don't know what to do, so I'm just like, and it was super cool.
So wait, you got his hat? You
Yeah.
traded?
Yeah.
You traded?
You got Pope's
Tell
hat?
me on the
So-
inside you said Life of Tweet.
Yeah, so like and subscribe.
You're like, what? Like and
Right.
subscribe.
No, it was neat. It was super awesome. Daniel had like a couple of rosaries in his hand. He kind of like touched it, and then he kind of just was wheeled off.
Now, after that moment where you kind of look around the other couples, like,
Yeah,
What did
Who
you
brought the
want?
hat?
Nothing.
Well,
Who
kind of,
brought
but the
hat?
thing is, as soon as like they're done though, so he has like a whole entourage of people. So as soon as it's done, they're telling them like, okay, get up and then fold up your chairs and then leave. So as soon as like he like has finished like greeting them, they're already
Get
like
out.
up and being kind of escorted
Ushered out, yeah.
Yeah. So it was
That's
kind of like they
crazy.
weren't like sticking around to see like how he interacted with us.
How much you think you're going to get for that hat on eBay?
That's what I'm
thought
saying,
about
bro. You could retire on that hat, probably.
I don't know. There's the people audiences. They're called.
That's awesome.
It's a general audience, right? But then afterwards, he does the Spousey Novelli blessing.
with the video.
There's a YouTube on it, like every single Wednesday, so you can see us and you can see like where we are, and it's kind of like we look like. Not like a speck, but then sometimes like how they do like the zooming.
Yeah.
So then you'll see it's like us, but I gotta find the time to actually extract that little
moment.
that little portion, that
that's
clip.
gonna be awesome.
And they
That is
told us not to
awesome.
like take selfies or have our phones out, because you know me, I wanted to have like the phone out and get like the moment with him. They said no,
Well, all
just be,
celebrities do that.
they said just be in the moment. There's gonna have the papal paparazzi are gonna take pictures, and of course they're gonna say that it's available for purchase later on. But they said just put your phones
Disneyland.
away, just be in it. So
It's like a gift shop. In the
Yep,
corner.
exactly.
Next
Yeah.
to
So
the
cool.
gift
It's like
shop.
go over here and buy the
paparazzi.
Pope's
Yes.
staff and
Yes.
the hat and everything.
I'm hoping to do something along that same way with Willie Nelson.
I thought you were
and
gonna say
it'd be
yourself.
about the same.
I was like, I should have brought you a hat.
Right.
Bring a hat that'll fit Willie.
Chop off one of his braids.
Come on, Willie.
That's great. Well, I know we got to get in our thing, but that is what
was
a
awesome.
unique story. I mean,
yeah.
that's
Amazing.
incredible.
Met the
Really
Pope.
All right.
Should have brought him with these topics. Jeez.
Well, and I think
Say,
that transitions well
perfectly
into our
into
topic.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming now. I feel like I'm gonna follow that, but we're doing it.
Come on, follow the Pope, Mike.
Salem Witch Trials.
Yeah.
You knew we were gonna cover it, people. Come on.
At
Come on.
some point.
Do you believe in it? Who knows? We're gonna find out together. All right. And Tweet, what you got for us?
Well, the Salem Witch Trials was actually like a real thing. It happened.
All right, I believe.
Yeah.
That was quick.
It's a matter of people. It's a matter of if they were like actually witches or not, right?
Right.
But
No.
one of the reasons why I kind of had an interest in this was because it was actually, I don't know if many of you remember. I know that you know it, but you might not remember. But I'm from Massachusetts. I'm from the Boston area.
Yeah.
So like it was my 6th or 7th grade field trip was to go to the Witch Museum, and it was kind of like if you think about it now, that's kind of like horrifying.
Yeah.
For a little kid to go
Because-
to? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a whole
And a little girl to go to.
In
Well,
Salem?
Fuck.
Yeah, we went to Salem.
Yeah, this could have been you.
Right?
Well, here's the kicker. It was
Yeah.
actually, I went to a private school, so it was actually a Catholic school that took
gosh.
us there. So think about how controversial that was.
So weird.
They took us there. So it was our field trip, and it was a few. I mean, from what I remember, it wasn't that big. It takes maybe like an hour if you were to like really sit and read all the little exhibits and stuff. And I think there was like a portion where you might like sit in this room and they kind of talk with the speakers and stuff and recreate the whole trial or part of a trial to kind of show you what it was like. But the whole thing was maybe like an hour, right?
Wow.
And it's like wax figurines depicting scenes of like
Everything.
hangings and stuff, and it's
From
like
the
wow,
beginning.
like that's horrible.
Yeah.
Chuck E. Cheese
But
for
it's
the witch
really
trials.
fascinating, though.
Yeah.
It's a cool story, and the way that they've done it all is pretty cool to see.
Sure.
I mean, you're just all in that big room, but they go from one, like they'll highlight one, and they'll tell the story about it. You'll see the guy sat there in his chair, or the two
Right.
girls playing outside.
Right.
They'll light up each section, and it's really cool how they've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Never
visited,
been there.
right?
I went to Salem. Yeah. Well, Halloween as well when we went. It was really cool.
Oh,
It's
cool.
really interesting.
That's the best time to go.
I think that they've updated the way that they display the exhibits since then, because when I went, let's see, it's probably like I think late 80s.
Yeah.
So since then, I think they've made it a little bit more modernized, and they
Yeah.
probably included like some virtual stuff. But yeah, it was, the thing that kind of like strikes me is like the trials only took place maybe like a little over a year. It was from February of 1692 to May of 1693, so a little over a year. But it has such impact, more so than the Spanish Inquisition that took place over 200 years. So if you think about it that way, it's only like a little over a year, but yet look at the huge impact
It
of
was
it.
some boiled down stuff, man. Like, it was like rich.
It wasn't the Spanish Inquisition. That was more people died than that, didn't they?
Well, sure, but
Well, talking about like within a year,
Oh, I see.
how much happened in that year.
yeah,
Right.
and
versus
impact.
Yeah.
an impact.
It's a compelling story.
Yeah, it really like. Well, I mean, the English Protestants got there in 1926. Yeah, or 1626.
I was
My
gonna say
bad.
1926.
1626.
Super late
So
to this, huh?
they were the settlers in the beginning that started this whole thing.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing.
That's interesting. So let's
But-
start from the beginning. What happened? What were we talking about?
Well, I guess it all started just as a couple of young girls were exhibiting just kind of weird symptoms and things, and experiencing itching and convulsions, and people were thinking that maybe they were possessed by the devil, caused by witches, and that might have been a good theory, except for the fact that at that time people were pretty petty, and if they had just even the smallest tiff with their neighbor, that could be, they're sort of like,
You're a witch.
Oh,
Yes.
easy. No,
Yeah.
it became that.
I
straight
know,
up.
that's exactly
Did
what
it
it was.
devolve into that, or is it? You know what I mean?
It started like that almost. It seemed. Yeah, it didn't evolve. It was just
Really?
like they were already so stuck in their belief system
Yeah.
that Now it was a matter of fact.
And it was all kind of like this holier than thou system, right?
Oh yeah,
Sure.
I mean, English Protestants, man, they were constantly battling Native Americans and French, what is it? French settlers too.
Yeah.
So like they're starving and famine and same shit as we always talk about with religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of tensions going on anyways in that colonial time. So add on to the fact that if, you had like a tiff with your neighbor, what can you do to get back at them, right? Call them like a witch to kind of get them off your back.
Right.
But it was horrifying because just someone accusing you of that could just automatically mean that now you're imprisoned, and then you had to basically prove that you were innocent. So you're automatically guilty unless you could prove that you were innocent.
And also, you'd lose your property, your house,
Everything.
your land,
Like,
everything.
if you died,
so
yeah.
like if somebody wanted your land, that's what they would say. Like, that person's a witch.
You're a witch.
Yeah, and it
Got
would take.
lakeside property out.
And you also you had to pay. You had to pay for being in prison, and for however long you were in there, you had to pay. And until you'd paid that, you couldn't get out, whether they found you guilty or not. If they found you innocent, you had to pay for the length of time you'd stayed there before they let you out.
It's kind of like prison now, though. I mean, you only get paid like cents on the dollar
Because you should get paid.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they're just deducting what you owe.
Right. Yeah.
I'm probably, just because you just happen to bring that up, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but if you pled guilty or not guilty, then that was like one thing. But if you did not take any kind of plea, then you're what's called, I guess you could be pressed to death. And there's like several different ways that they could do that. But usually it was basically they would tie you down, all of your limbs, and then slowly add weight onto your body until you were eventually crushed.
Boulders.
Yeah. I mean, back in, I guess in Europe, it would be things like elephants that would crush you. Like they were given commands and they would slowly crush your bones or your skull. But I guess in colonial America, it was with the use of like weights, like bricks or
we
boulders.
There was
elephants,
one in Europe, I believe it was England, unfortunately, that got crushed by a bridge. Like, they put the bridge on them, they closed the bridge on
that
them.
I don't
Or like
know.
a drawbridge. That makes sense.
Oh.
Yeah. But that was only one.
Lucky guy.
I mean, you gotta get
were no
creative.
more- there were no
it
more
was
witches
exclusive.
after
You gotta
that.
get creative.
That was a little excessive for us.
That was mainly for spectacle,
Well, what I was going to say with that was elaborating on what Edith was saying was that if you didn't plead guilty or not guilty, then you would be pressed. And the thing is, if you had pled guilty or not guilty, then your heirs would not inherit your property, your land, anything. But if you just were neither, and they just remained mum's word for the whole entire time, then at least even though you die, at least your heirs could still keep your property. And the one gentleman who was executed by that method, he went by the name of Giles something, but he refused to plead either way, and he was pressed to death. And then supposedly, legend has it, is that his last words were more weight, as they put the last weight on him, which crushed him to death.
Badass.
So
Yeah, right.
And he vouched for that because he wanted his daughters to continue to have
To
his
have
property.
his property
Right.
and land.
So he refused to say
Well, yeah.
anything.
Yeah, there you go.
it was horrifying. This whole thing, the Salem Witch
if
Trials.
if you confessed, you were given. Some people were just let go. Like, as long as you confessed and said you wouldn't be a witch anymore.
What?
Yeah.
Most of the time, you had to confess and then point the finger at
Somebody
someone
else. Exactly.
Was the main
Yep.
thing. If you were going to confess, you had to give up another name.
Yep.
In lieu of
That was
yourself.
a part of confession. Yep.
Or
Give somebody else. Point
right,
the
or
finger.
you were like in prison for a little while, but then if you were, I guess, accused of it a second time, then that might mean your execution.
Now,
So-
was there anybody at the head of this that was kind of like orchestrating this nonsense?
All
'Cause-
politics.
There was like judges.
Well, that comes later with the judges.
Right.
Like, that's where it ends, kind of, with judges.
How so?
Oh, well, I don't want to get to the end yet.
Okay. So,
Well, then you're alluding to the fact that this was vigilante, not law.
some of it, yeah. Well,
But
basically,
it
that's
was
what
law.
it was.
It was law, but law was like vigilante back then. It was very sus.
Right. Yeah. Just because someone accused of you then that's what
That's
you
it.
were.
There were 3 considered outsiders too. Did you get that? The three girls that were first.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, February 29th, police arrested Sarah Good. She was a poor pregnant mother of a young daughter. Sarah Osborne, long been absent from the church, suing a family, actually, of the accusers. And then Tituba, or I think it's
she was the
Tituba,
maid.
a slave girl in Betty Paris's home.
Yeah.
And they were all pointed at by these little girls that you were talking about. Like, just these little, 9 and 12-year-old girls.
that was skipping around.
Yeah,
getting
skipping around, being like,
garden,
and they
playing.
just pointed fingers at these. And they said that they did or said things or did things to them to make this happen.
Because the girl was having epilepsy, or she was
they were
epileptic,
eating
or
mushrooms.
something,
It seems like,
right? In
They-
the
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Psychedelics were involved in it.
Yeah. Towards the end, it was probably they just had psychedelics or a fungus infection, which that can also lead to nightmares and weird shit and all kinds of stuff too.
Yeah, I heard that some people think they were victim of some kind of bacterial
Yep. Yeah.
Like a bad water supply or something.
bad water supply or
And then the little girls are just like, she talks shit to me. And then, now now they're witches. That shit's fucked up, man.
Was it through the legal system, or was it through the church, or were they combined?
Oh, their legal system.
I mean, there wasn't really an established one back then, right?
An established legal
Their
system?
police.
Quite. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean,
don't-
there were laws. I mean, in other words, at that point in time, now what year, this is
100.
92.
1692.
Oh,
So we're just going off of whatever, I would think the laws here would just have carried over from whatever the laws were in England.
Well, not
Right.
quite, because all those people escaped England. They probably would not want to base it off of.
Yeah, they escaped England, but this was still, to the English, this was considered theirs.
From what I gathered,
To the English monarchy,
tightly knit.
this was theirs until
Yeah.
we decided to
and
pull away.
from what I could tell, a lot of America was what you were saying, where they didn't want to follow what the English had kind of pushed upon them before, but in Salem was kind of a community who did want to follow those old
Okay.
rules.
and close knit too.
Yes,
Really,
so-
no outsiders.
Yeah, so that's maybe part of the reason why this issue seems to be really concentrated right here, perhaps.
And I'm just curious, was there any of this? Did this come from it? In other words, were these same types of accusations and punishments and things going on in England?
I believe that
Carry
there
over
were,
from
yeah,
it?
like in England and in France too. But I think it was maybe more, I don't want to say well known, because I'm not sure about the history of witch trials in Europe, but it was so, I guess, infamous or notorious here because it was such a, I don't want to say a dense, but such a huge, deep-rooted belief in the Puritan ways. So maybe it was more extreme in the colonial times or pre-colonial times back then.
From what I could tell, we were kind of late to the game with this.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
America was a little bit late to the game in terms of witch trials, and in England,
Yep.
this was happening a little bit before this time period. And also over a much smaller amount of time, like you mentioned, all the most well-known cases really only happened within a year, and it was so much devastation within a year, whereas almost anybody who was accused was basically put to death, where in Europe a lot of people who were accused were just let go, and they were only accused, and there were many less people being put to death, at least not in one such a short period of time, basically.
Right.
So
Which kind of makes you, it makes you think that this had something more to do with taking advantage of. In other words, you got a very strict Puritan. You got a strict. It doesn't matter. We'll say Puritan. I think this it carries over. I think a lot to what we see that happens in extremist Muslim countries. Where if you fall out of the order at all, then they want you out or dead. They don't want they just want you eliminated, and they want to do it in such a way that obviously they can acquire your property.
And still be on top.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
I would imagine too, with like, being that they were just scared and afraid, all the things going on, and then if someone was experiencing, convulsions, or if they were experiencing welts on their body, so the doctors didn't know what it was, right? So it was just easy, so to speak, to say that it was the devil or the result of witchcraft. So it was like an easy explanation.
Especially if somebody.
But why were certain people chosen? In other words, you wonder. You're talking about it's a year time, and if I catch this right, it's a year time when this was extreme. Okay, and I don't know how many people were put to death
Like
or
20.
property
20
taken or
people.
whatever in this
19,
small
20.
town. But then it seems like what you're alluding to too is that by the end of that year, or as this went along, after a certain period of time, the people themselves, probably the rest of the population, went, "This is out of control." This has gotten out of control.
By the spring of 1693, 100 people were imprisoned, 14 women, and 6 men were executed.
And I think that they were pardoned in like.
Well, yeah,
Rest
the rest of them. Well, that was once the governor, because the shit got so crazy that all of a sudden they're like, everyone is just pointing fingers, and as soon as somebody pointed the finger at the governor, and a governor's wife, actually, they're like, "Oh, witch," and he's just like, "Nope." Shutting that down real quick. Suspended the trials, sentences were amended, and prisoners were released, and that was the end of this crazy shit that went down, man. Yeah. Well, basically, I'm sure there's still some.
I mean, it's like when you really, what I would logically think, especially at that point in time, you probably had a small group of wealthy, powerful, citizens, landowners, whatever, that were controlling this. Because
Watching it.
if they weren't controlling, in other words, you had your hierarchy. They had to put their stamp of approval on it somehow, because they're the power brokers. I mean, they're the ones with all the money and wealth. You're not talking about a massive population of people to rise up against them. You know what I mean, with their money. So they had to be, not only okay with it, I would think they had to be the ones that were orchestrating this for whatever reason.
More land,
even
more
and they didn't have to
property.
be, even in history, their names never had to be out front. They could do that very easily, underneath the covers, so to speak. And but it just makes sense to me in that day and time, and in that kind of a small population, that this was happening in a short window. It's like somewhere there was a group of powerful people, maybe only one or two, that decided for whatever reason this needed to happen.
That's the confusing part. That's
It
kind
seems
of
like
what I
a cult.
asked. That's kind of what I asked earlier. Though, is like where's the motive? What's the motive behind this? Or is this just mass hysteria? Because it sounds like it could be both.
It seemed like it was a cult in the very beginning. Like, Salem and their witch trials in their tiny little bubble was the cult. And then as soon as it got outside the cult, that's when the governor's like, that's when the politics got involved, from what I gathered.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think a huge part of it is just trying to make a population more controllable. Like you were saying at the beginning, one woman in particular, she had been estranged from the church for a while. And so I feel like if you're a really tight-knit group of Puritans and you see, oh, she's not going to church anymore, what's the next step? She's going to start thinking for herself, going to start
Converting
reading
others.
books, converting other people.
Oh my God.
And then it's just about
Independent
scaring anybody who's even considering that, stepping out of line, into not doing that at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge part of it, is just keeping it all
Yeah,
controlled.
that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Which
Biggest
would
part
be
that boggles
the
my
upper
mind.
crust of the power
Right.
that's there.
The biggest
Exactly.
part that boggles my mind is that it's all started with little kids. It was 2 little kids that were like, "Nuh-uh," like they did it, and then this just shows me how just we believed in magic
Mass
and
hysteria.
just mass stupid shit, and and didn't know what was going on, and then two little kids are just like they did it, and then they just kept rolling
Well, what
with
did
it.
that take?
Kept rolling with it, and
Two
then
pieces of taffy.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
what I'm
you
saying.
know.
And then the money's on the outside looking in, being like, "What the fuck is going on over in Salem?"
Yeah.
Like what? And then they're watching it like with popcorn and shit, just being like,
Yeah, and then the second the governor's wife is
Yeah,
affected,
exactly.
they're like,
Nope,
just
shut it
kidding,
down.
Just kidding. This isn't
"Yeah,
funny
nope,
anymore."
this ain't happening anymore."
No.
They were probably placing bets and shit on Salem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. In that sense. Yeah, you're just bribing the kids. They're
Yeah,
just
can you
a
imagine being
setup.
those kids? And then you get a little older and you're like, that probably was not something I should
Mom,
have
why did you tell me
Why
to
did-
point them out?
Yeah.
It's like, 'cause
Like,
she
I
was
can
a slut.
imagine the guilt.
Like,
That's
Like,
really what it were. I mean, the first woman, Dorothy Bishop.
it was family going against family.
She'd go to bars, drinks,
Yep.
drinks and stuff. She dressed provocatively, and that's why she was accused.
Fucking witch.
Well, of course, you've fallen out of this, like
The
you just
norm.
said, you've fallen out of the strict parameters of the religious order that is that community, and that community does not allow it. They don't, and it's like this was a way that they could go, the extreme way to go. We're going to make an example of a few people. And that'll pull everybody in line.
Back in line.
Exactly right.
Super fun people. They all sound like really fun to hang out with.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's where
open.
Twee's from. That's where Twee
Dude,
comes
Sarah,
from.
Sarah, was it Good? Sarah
Sarah
ended
Good.
up- well, one of them, I think it was Sarah Good. She ended up giving birth in jail too. Baby died, and then she was hung and
Executed. And her
executed.
youngest child was 4 years old.
Yeah,
And they
arrested.
was-
They arrested a
Uh-huh.
4-year-old child.
4-year-old, put in jail for 8 months, 8
Yeah,
months.
like what the fuck?
Until the mother
That's
was.
hysteria.
That's
to the
fu-
point
They
where you're
also-
like, that kid's evil. Like, that's insane.
right?
Truly. Like,
Absolutely.
you're looking past all your ethics and morale.
And this 4-year-old kid is now Satan to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of
That's
their
extreme.
mom.
Living in
You know,
swell.
That's
like
extreme.
In pitch
extreme.
black, in stone
fucking
cold. Did
insane.
you go down in dungeons at all?
I didn't.
Where
for
they
that.
kept him, it
Oh,
was
wait, what's
just
her name?
dark, and there were
Tuba-
candles
did I
in
fuck
there
it up?
too, but it was
Tuba?
just dark, and they were saying that water rose up so high and they'd all be sitting in their own filth for months and months.
Oh, of course.
What's her name?
Yeah.
Titchuba, I
Tituba.
believe is how
Oh yeah, okay. So Tituba, like that's, I found this kind of weird. Is like when she was put up on the pedestal or whatever, to in front of everybody. She denied it at first, but then she confessed that she did it under the devil's orders, and then charged Good and Osborne that they forced her to do it, and that was just pretty
That's-
much her being forced to point a finger.
That they've proven that with torture, though.
Yeah, that's
You're-
what I'm saying.
You're never actually going to get the right. They'll
No,
just tell you.
you're
what
never
you
gonna
wanna
get the
hear.
right
to
answer,
make it
man.
stop.
Yeah, she just wanted the torture to stop.
Yeah.
Wanted it to go down, but that's what's recorded. Is that she stated that it was Good and Osborne that did it, and that dude, she ended up being let go in the end, and Osborne died in jail, and Good was hung or executed. It fucked up.
But it's always amazing when it's done under a religion, especially the Christian religion. Right. When something's done under the Christian religion, and you go and as a follower of the Christian religion, your whole basis of your belief system is the teachings of Christ.
Yeah.
Not the Old Testament. None of that. It's all about. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be the teachings of Christ, and how you can come up with that,
I don't
with
think this is what
this,
Jesus would do.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Whether it was the Inquisition or whatever, all this horror, all that. Anytime you see a Christian group that does this horrible shit, and you go, how do you get from Christ to there? I mean, it's just the most amazing
Cut off from
warp,
information.
You know?
A lot of shitty men talking.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly. It
Yeah.
was
Good
fucking.
Lord.
Which begs the question. We go back to when you went to your field trip. Like you went to a private Catholic school. Like what was the lesson? Like this is what happens when you separate from Catholicism. Like
I don't know. I mean,
You're a
some of it
witch.
was just, I think, just learn about history, because it was only an hour. It was only like an hour long thing. It was kind of grouped in with a few other excursions,
Okay.
for lack of a better word. But we also did the whole Paul Revere ride. So we kind of like not reenacted it, but we walked that trail, the Freedom Trail, and then we visited the USS Constitution, which is a huge boat. I don't know if it's still harbored right there, but it was like several things. So that was a part of that historic kind of colonial times era, but it was still a part of our field trip nonetheless. So it was like kind of, wow, okay. I'm 12, like you're showing me like this wax figure. He's about to be hung. He's standing on like this stand with the noose around his head, and it's supposed to show that this is the scene from Mr. So-and-so, and you're like 12 and you're watching this, and they're wax figures, but it's still
horrifying. I'm sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
like
I'm
what?
just trying to figure out what the lesson was there. Like,
Don't be a witch.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. No, continue with the Catholic
Seems
religion.
like
please.
indoctrination. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Oh, dude, yeah, I forgot. The 4-year-old daughter was not just only in prison, but was made to give testimony
Yes.
against the mom.
They questioned the 4-year-old.
Yeah, and
That's how it
and
works.
it was held in court. Yeah, and Jesus Christ.
Incredible.
Anyway,
Insane.
I'm sure she gave
brutal.
some valuable information.
Oh my God, yeah,
You
yeah.
know what
did
that
it.
makes me think of? That episode of Black Mirror.
Oh God, all Black
The
Mirror is
baby,
amazing.
that's like almost that whole idea that, that person in that certain episode, they totally disregard that this is a baby and they can't physically say anything, but basically they're so scared of the idea that they might, you know what I mean?
At some point.
At some point.
When you read that thing about Tituba, did you read about how they, I guess, used things against her to try to convict her?
Yeah, they forced her statement pretty much. From
Right.
what I gathered.
Well, there was like several ways that you can test. I'm sure you know that that you can test to see if someone was a witch or not.
yeah, I saw that.
And one of the ways, because tying into Tituba, right, is what's called witch cakes, which sounds kind of like silly and fun and maybe even
sounds-
tasty.
No.
Tasty, yeah.
But no, it was disgusting because it was a combination of whoever the victim was, the alleged victim. It was a sample of their urine mixed in with some like rye or barley and some other ingredients, and it was made into a cake, and it was given to dogs to eat. And supposedly it would put the dogs in a trance, hoping to utter the name of the person who caused the affliction. So the reason why they knew about witch cakes was, I guess, the lady Tituba had shared this recipe because she's from, the Caribbean? And they said because even though the cakes failed to produce any kind of names,
You think?
they said that just the fact that she knew that spell, that potion, or that
Recipe.
that
Witch.
recipe means that she was a witch. So they used that to use against
Indict
her.
her essentially.
Yeah. That was
like
one of the ways.
Cookbooks were really
Yeah.
just witch books.
Yeah, they're like, confess you're a witch. She's like, all right, I have this recipe. They're like, you're a witch.
Yeah,
We
right?
knew it.
These are just my grandma's biscuits.
Yeah.
With my next door neighbor's pissing.
Yeah, I know, right?
Don't eat them. Don't. All right. Well, we've come a long way.
Yum.
And they're still with you.
Have we?
I don't know.
I mean,
I
kinda.
like to think that we've made
think we
it
do.
far. Hopefully, nobody's eating piss cakes. You know what I mean?
No. You can be a witch now.
Urinal
It's okay.
cakes.
Be a witch and
okay.
eat piss cakes, bro.
You can be a
Don't
witch. There
judge.
are witches.
Don't judge.
We're allowed to
talked
be
about-
witches now.
White witches, yeah.
Yeah, we talked
yeah.
about that back in the ghost. When we were talking about ghosts, I was telling that story about the witch
Yeah,
woman
right.
in North Carolina.
Yeah, a white witch.
The white witch.
Oh,
yeah, exactly
yeah,
right.
Yeah, I remember that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
my what was it? Grandma's step grandma. Yeah, she
Your
was a white
step-grandma's
witch.
a witch?
Well, she's dead now, but she was a white witch. Yeah.
Or is she?
No, she might not be.
That's true.
Well, in November of 2001, years after the 300th anniversary of the Salem Witch Trials, Massachusetts legislature passed an act exonerating all who had been convicted and naming each of those innocent people, with the exception of someone by the name of Elizabeth Johnson, but she was later on cleared in 2022. Historians believe that she was actually intellectually disabled, so maybe she was like mentally handicapped, even though she confessed to witchcraft back in 1693.
She was mentally handicapped. God, we
Right.
were just we were bullying people, even the mentally challenged, into becoming witches.
Yeah, well, in that day and time, Matt, the mentally challenged were considered animals anyway.
Yeah.
They were subhuman.
No rights.
You know, I mean, hell, it was up. They were still hiding people that had those disabilities in the 60s. They were still hiding them.
Yep.
You know, so. But there are witches. There's people that practice it.
Yep.
It is a type
and
of
bad.
religion.
Good and bad.
It is a
If-
type of religion.
If anything, it's on the rise. Like new spiritualism and witchcraft is on the rise because, and I think that a huge draw to it now is the idea that you can kind of do whatever you want and believe whatever you want inside
Pretty much.
it as a religion. Like I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to it because they feel like
And a lifestyle.
it can be whatever they want it to be rather than I feel most people think religions are more like rigid than that, you know.
Yeah. I want nothing to do with it, man.
Right?
Stay away from me,
for me.
witches. All right. I think we did it, guys.
What if it was a really, really hot witch?
They wanted to know your
Come at me,
birth
witches.
Yeah. No, and then you're gonna be like,
Curse me.
it's okay. You
It'll
say
be
that
too late
now.
before you know.
Say that now until you're hopping around on one leg or something. And you're
Hey,
Has this
might have
happened to
been
you?
a, might have been a
Maybe.
good
I'm
ride
not
for
gonna
the
tell
one
you.
leg.
Listen.
It might have been a time Mike would have said, "I'd have given my left leg to have."
Yeah, exactly. I don't need my leg. I can still do comedy. I'll have a good fucking story, too.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. We did it. We covered the Salem witches, right?
Yes,
Yes.
plenty.
Enough, right? Yeah. Terrifying.
enough to terrify you all.
Thank you for tuning Thank you for tuning into another episode, and like and subscribe, please. Follow us on Facebook. Go to our Instagram at Curdy's Comedy Official, and definitely come see a world famous comedy show right here at the Curdy's Comedy Theater. We'll see you next time. Good night, guys.